So this is the last race before tea. It's a heat of the, well, semi-final of the King's Cup, that amazing race that was first run 100 years ago. The United States Armed Forces at the top of your picture from the Annapolis Navy Academy, and Forces Armées Françaises closest to you on the Buckinghamshire station, the Island station. And we'll talk you through the history of this event as we go down the course. But both these crews are racing for the honour of a place in the final against the German Armed Forces crew who beat the Australians earlier today.
Incredible event. It's got such an unbelievable history and symbolism and status, and it's brought all sorts of extra interest to this year's regatta as we mark that 100 years since the peace regatta that was held in 1919 as part of allowing British society to heal after the Great War.
Such an important focus, sport, to allow society to come together, and this was one of the ways it was done 100 years ago after that dreadful conflict in the First World War. You can see the US Navy has really come out to a big lead. This French crew have only been together for 1 week. I was talking to their coaching team, and they're saying they're getting better every race, but this USA crew have really gone out with a purpose, haven't they?
Very powerful from those members of the Naval Academy, who themselves are celebrating 150 years of rowing at the United States Naval Academy. So they are really impressive, and they will be strongly supported by all of the forces back home in this race here.
Well, 100 years ago, Kath, in the first round of this race, the King's Cup in 1919, guess who was racing each other? It was the US Armed Forces and the French Armed Forces. And the French Armed Forces had to borrow their boat, and they were quite a fancy crew, good physique, so the Times rowing correspondent said, but it was not to be, and the US Armed Forces won. And is history repeating itself, because US Armed Forces look set for a commanding lead?
Yeah, the French had a really tough race against the Brits yesterday. It was a real lungbuster, went all the way down the course, fantastic kind of match-up. So they also had that kind of much tougher race to recover from, as the US had a stronger race against the Canadians. And again, that's putting the French under so much pressure here, and the US looks so powerful. Brilliant to see mixed eights racing down the Henley Royal Regatta course, and it's so important that it reflects the place of women in the armed services today to have these mixed crews, and it's such a great sight.
That's absolutely, and of course you would know in the British women's team we've had a female oarswoman captain, Heather Stanning, from the armed forces, with served with the artillery in Afghanistan. And
she was coaching the British crew yesterday.
Well, that's really interesting. One thing I'm going to ask you is, both these crews have put the two female rowers, so in the American crew, midshipman second class Alexandra Valancy-Martins, and midshipman first class Margaret Dawson, and for the French crew, Private Lucie Giraud and Private Sandy Webber. They put them up in the bows. Is that where you would put women in a boat, or perhaps might you have put them in the stern, a little better rhythm? What's your sense on that?
I think, they're lighter, aren't they? Traditionally, even if you're in a men's eight or women's eight, you often put the lighter people, certainly at one end or other. The more power traditionally we put in the middle. So, you can understand that they perhaps want that precision that they bring. The bows lift up every stroke. So, again, you want the light people to be quick on there. So, I think you expect it at either end. Often there are mixed eights that happen at our sort of home regattas, aren't they? The fun regattas around the summer, and that's where you often see them bow pair or stern pair.
So there's the US boat you can see with the stars and stripes, and their boat is, well, the naming of the boat, you see that zooming in there, Overlord, which was the name given to the Allied invasion of Northern Europe on the beaches of Normandy. And they asked their commanding officer, what should we call our boat? And he thought for a while and said Overlord, because that was when Europe was freed with the help of, among others, the American Armed Forces. 100 years ago, the American Armed Forces had been in the war for 1 year. They came in 1917 and paid a very heavy cost in toll of lives in the offensives in eastern France. But the American Armed Forces crew that raced in 1919 knocked out by Oxford in the semi-final. The Oxford crew made up of British Armed Forces. That was 100 years ago, but this crew look like they'll be going on to face the German Armed Forces, who already are through, having raced the Australian Armed Forces crew and beaten them earlier today.
And each of them have had incredible experience. They've been living together over the last few weeks, training together, sharing the rowing on and off the water, and that kind of in itself is that symbol of the international cooperation that existed then and that it's so strong today and so important in everything that they do.
And if you're interested in the history of the King's Cup, there is a book written by Bruce Coe. It's called Pulling Together. It's on sale at the Regatta bookshops, on Richard Way bookshops, that famous rowing bookshop in Henley. And I was having a look at it earlier today. It's really interesting.
And there's actually a website about the King's Cup, www.kingscup.org, and that's got more information about each of the participants in the crew as well as the history of the event. So lots of opportunity to read up more about this unbelievably historic event.
So here's this US crew. They've been rowing for the Navy College at the National Championships, the IRAs, the women's at the NCAA, of course, the men at the IRAs. So they've only come together recently, been together for a few weeks. And just seeing a shot of the coxswain there, midshipman third class, Matthew Catano. All of these guys are ranked midshipmen, and that's pretty much because it's not until they graduate that they decide whether they go into the Marines. Some of them might go into the SEALs, some of them might go and serve with the fleet, and then they'll get ranked. So they're all midshipmen. Some are midshipmen first class, some are midshipmen second class. So you've got 3 midshipmen second class at 7 stroke and cox in that American crew. That's furthest towards the stern of the boat. And then the 6-man midshipman first class, Jacob Golowski. He's one of the guys dividing the big pound in the middle of the boat from the IRA Championships.
And they are going to go on to race for that unbelievably beautiful new specially commissioned trophy that all of the countries have contributed to, sending precious pieces of metal from their historic private collections, military and royal, for the King's Cup final tomorrow.
So the Navy crew crossed the line for the American Armed Forces, coached by Rod Frederick and Jessica Dietrich, and that was a pretty commanding victory over the crew from the French Armed Forces in that semi-final of the King's Cup. So it will be the Americans who will go through tomorrow to face the Germans for the King's Cup.